The Jacob's Ladder stitch for knitting is actually a whole lot of fun. I love the look it creates. So you need your piece that you're going to make the Jacob's Ladder on. And in this case, I've just done garter stitch. I started with a long tail cast on. I have found that the long tail cast on works for the drop stitches that I need to be able to do. I haven't really found any other cast-ons that work. The important part about the cast-on is when you drop your stitches and run them down, which you'll see later, the cast-on needs to be able to drop and run as well. Now, since this is a garter stitch, I'm going to make this row by knitting till I get to the stitches I need to drop. So I'm going to knit 4, I think. And then most of the time when I do this, I actually drop 3. Doesn't mean you have to. You could do a different number if that's what makes you happy. But I usually drop 3, so I'm going to drop 3 stitches off. Just push them right off my needle. And then I'm going to do 4 again. Drop 3 more. And then do the last 4 stitches. Now here comes time to pull all the stitches and then to loop my Jacob's Ladder. Okay, so I'm just going to pull these out. Now sometimes when I drop the stitches, I'll actually do a yarn over in its place. It just kind of depends. And look, I was dropping the stitches and I'm down to only 2, so I need to make sure that I find where I lost that 3rd one. Okay. So just keep going, pulling them down, and as you make them run, just make sure that you really do have 3 stitches the whole time. If you get down to 1 or 2, then go back and, look back up your little run and see where the straggler is. It does happen. So sometimes you can just kind of pull and yank and it comes down. Sometimes you kind of have to pull out each one, but you want to run it all the way down. Okay, now I have that cast on and you can see that I can run the cast on as well. I can pull that cast on out as well. One of the stitches is a little tighter, one of the lines is a little tighter, one is a little looser. That's not a big deal. You just want to make sure that you can run all the way through. And now I want to do my other one as well. Careful not to push this off the end of your knitting needle. You might even want to put a little stopper on the end of your knitting needle, or if you're knitting on the circulars, push it down really far so that you don't accidentally knock your working yarn off. We've dropped all the stitches and now it's time to loop our little ladders. So I have these 2 sections of ladders, is what I've been calling them, and they have the long little pieces of yarn from where I dropped that set of 3 stitches. I find when working with a garter stitch, usually I want to pick up the same number of ladders as stitches I dropped. So in this case, I dropped 3 stitches, so I'm going to pick up 3 ladders at a time. When I finish one, I'll explain to you what you want to do if you need to, to figure out if you need to adjust that number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bottom 3 little ladders, I'm going to twist them, and I use a crochet hook. You can use your fingers. I think a crochet hook makes it easier. You just want it to be nice and big. Now I've got those 3, so I'm going to pick up the next 3 little ladders with my crochet hook. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to pull them right through the loop. I don't need to twist them or anything, just pull them through the loop. Now I'm going to grab the next 3 little ladder pieces. There we go. Pull them through the crochet hook. And I'm going to keep on going all the way up, 3 at a time. Oh, I thought I missed one, but no, it was my tail. 3 at a time. Pull them through the loop and then go to the next one and pull them through the loop. You want to make sure you're working from the front of your work. In this case, it's a garter stitch, so there isn't really a front of my work. But if you're doing something that has a front, make sure you're working from the front because you want this stitch that you're making to lie on the top of your work. Okay, so here we go, 3 more. Okay, I've gotten to the last one and I have 4 left, okay? I could do 3 and then I could pull through 3 little ladder pieces, and then I'd have one piece left, but I don't want that one piece left, so I'm just going to pull through all of them. If I ended and there were 5, I'd pull three through, and then I'd pull the last 2 through. But if you didn't like do fancy math and make sure you had the, it doesn't even have to be that fancy. If you didn't do math and make sure you had the exact right number of stitches of rows, then you might end up with that sort of situation, and you just kind of make it work. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to take this top loop and I'm going to put it on either a safety pin or a removable stitch marker, put it through that loop and over the knitting needle, just so that it doesn't fall down, so it doesn't run. If you find that it is pulling your work tight, you picked up too many of the runs and you need to pick up less. If you find that you're getting really like long runs on the side of it, or it just looks really loose, then you didn't pick up enough stitches. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm grabbing the bottom 3 little ladders and I'm going to twist them to put my crochet hook into them. You really do want to try to make sure you twist in the same direction every time you start a new run. If you don't, it's not a big deal, but it's just a consistency thing. It'll help it look a little more finished at the end. So now that I twisted the bottom one, I'm just pulling the next 3 through, and I'm going to keep on going 3 at a time and pulling them through to the top, where I should have 4 my very last time. Okay, I'm on my last pull through. I do have 4, so that is a very good sign that I didn't make any mistakes. Okay, and I'll show you another way to double check that. I'm putting it onto my removable stitch marker and putting my removable stitch marker around the hook of the needle right where I had dropped all those stitches. Now I'm going to turn this over and take a look. If I had missed any of my runs as I was going, which is not an uncommon thing to do, I make that mistake all the time, I would see just that piece of yarn lying across. So what I would need to do is drop my stitches back down to that point and fix it. Okay? Now, since it is correct, I'm going to make my next row. So I'm just going to work the next row as I would have normally. I'm going to knit across, and I'll show you what happens when we get to those stitches that we dropped. What I'm going to do here is continue working on my garter stitch until I get to the stitch marker. So I'm just going to knit until I get to the stitch marker. Here we go. Now, because I have the wrong side of the yarn of the project facing me, at this point I want my yarn to go in front. Okay, so my yarn is on the same side as the wrong side of the work. I'm now going to move this stitch marker off of my needle, and I'm going to put my needle from back to front through that whole group of loops as if they are a slip stitch, okay? Now I'm going to move my yarn back in back of my work so it is on the side it needs to be on to make more knit stitches, and I'm going to continue to knit to the next marker. Okay, next marker is here. Pull the yarn to the front of my work, okay, which happens to be the wrong side, but the front. Slide off those stitch markers, put my needle from back to front through that group of loops on my stitch marker, move my yarn where it needs to be to make the next stitch, which is more knit stitches, so in the back of the work. Keep knitting to the end. Okay, now I'm just going to turn my work and keep going and treat that group of stitches as if they are, that group of loops as if they are one stitch, which is why I have not removed the stitch marker yet. I want to be able to remember what the group of loops is, okay? So, still working in garter stitch, so I'm still just going to knit across, and that's all I'm going to do is knit across. Watch. We're just going to knit. And when I get to one of those groups of stitches, groups of loops, here we go. It's a group of a loop. I'm just going to knit into that entire group. And then keep on going. Keep knitting across. Okay, you could actually do your bind off on this row as well. Again, treating this group of loops as if they were just one stitch. Now you can remove your stitch marker if you have no other reason to need it on there. And you can see our work has finished up nicely. You could cast off, you could bind off here, or do whatever else you need to do. There you go.